Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org.
The Boise State Public Radio app. News, music, and more.
Idaho Matters.
Morning Edition.
All things considered.
The Connector.
And more.
And more.
You can take us wherever you go and stay connected. Without it, you're missing out. Download it free.
You can also communicate using the Talk to Us tab.
The Boise State Public Radio app.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. Marilyn Monroe may be one of the most photographed women in history, but she spent much of her life trying to be seen as more than just an image. In her new novel, When We Were Brilliant, Lynn Cullen tells the story of Monroe's friendship with photographer Eve Arnold. She's the woman that Marilyn chose to help show the world who she really was. Now, the book is told from Eve's point of view, and it follows their creative partnership and their friendship through the 1950s and 60s. And we're lucky enough to have Lynn joining us today to talk more. Lynn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
So, Lynn, the novel starts with a pretty bold move. I mean, at least in my opinion. Marilyn Monroe, she actually seeks out Eve Arnold in 1952, and she proposes this collaboration. What drew you to this moment and to that relationship between these two women?
That moment was just the natural moment because I base this book on a book that Eve Arnold wrote about Marilyn Monroe. It has a little biography about Marilyn and it has her photos about Marilyn. And what's extraordinary about both, it's from Eve's point of view, which is they were friends. And she was a woman, and her photographs of Eve's are like no one else's. And I've had a few author events already. My book just came out, and I do a little quiz where I have the audience pick out which are Eve's photos and who are other photographers. And they very quickly beat me at my quiz because they can see that Eve's photos look different than everyone else because these two women had a relationship. And Eve, the reason Marilyn sought out Eve, as you mentioned, is that she wanted to be seen. She wanted to be taken more seriously, as you say, than this bombshell image that she had. And she knew that Eve, with Eve's budding career as a documentary photographer, she felt that Eve could show her as she really is. Because one of Eve's, not one, but several of Eve's ways of photographing were different than what Marilyn had before. Marilyn was always in the studio or outside and still subject to posing, for the photographers, very controlled. And with Eve, they were really ad-libbing and playing off each other. Marilyn was able to show Norma Jean, this person inside this image that she created. So it was very exciting for them both and very exciting to write about.
It seems to me that Marilyn Monroe was so often portrayed as really kind of a passive victim, I think, right, of this image. But in the book, I mean, we really see her as deeply intentional. I mean, she really was actively trying to shape how she was seen. I mean, very similar to what we see so many celebrities doing today. I'm curious about that aspect of her character. I mean, did it surprise you during your research?
Well, yes, because like everyone else, all I knew was, these photos of her as a sex bomb, and in her movies, oftentimes she's portrayed as a fluffhead and things. Though I have to admit, for my research, looking at her movies, looking more closely, she's a way better actress than she might be seen as. She really was good. But she did seek out Eve because she was tired of being this creation that the studios wanted her to be. And one thing I really am strongly pointing out in my book is that she was in control. Um, in fact, Eve Arnold had a problem with the song "Candle in the Wind," where it stated that
Oh.
Marilyn was. There's just two lines in the song that really provoked her actually to write this book, because the lines say, "The studios built her and then they broke her." I'm paraphrasing, but there are two short lines that say that. And Eve, who knew what Marilyn did, blew up and said, "I'm going to write this book and set it straight," because Marilyn was, as you pointed out, very much in control of who, like she created Marilyn Monroe. It was not the studios that created her. That was all Marilyn.
Mm-hmm.
And like she teamed up with her makeup man who she knew from the very start when she was still Norma Jean. They created this Marilyn image together. And, Marilyn was very intentional. And, when when she could see herself being locked into this role, that's when she left the studio and created her own studio. Nobody did that. And the studios hated her for this. They paid her very little. Marilyn was not wealthy. They paid her as little as possible. Oftentimes, she was the least paid star on the show. And they
Wow.
wouldn't even give her a trailer for ages, her
Mm-hmm.
makeup trailer, on-set trailer. So they they were doing all they could to keep her down, even though it benefited them. But they were furious that this woman had power, that people loved Marilyn. To heck with the studios. They loved it wasn't the studio making that, it was Marilyn. So it was
Mm-hmm.
exhilarating learning this about her, that she was so smart and forward thinking. Um, it, she's way cooler than I ever thought.
You know what I thought was interesting too, though, and because this is something again that I see, I think that we see in now, and this is the idea that icons are not born. I mean, they're made, right? I mean, I
Hmm.
think we can take the Kardashians as a glaring example of that, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
yet, I mean, I think we can argue that Marilyn Monroe kind of came up with this concept and she and Eve together, at least you write about this in the book. I mean, they really created this image of Marilyn Monroe. I mean, they created Marilyn Monroe. Did their visions always align, or did they diverge sometimes on what this icon should be?
Well, actually, I don't. I think Marilyn's the icon was already being set into place
Hmm.
of her as this sex goddess before she met Eve. And Eve was actually a corrective to this. Eve's photo showed Marilyn as a person, as a woman, and showed that in spite of her, she's really not that gorgeous. Um, she has this something extra special about her that went beyond just physical beauty. And that's what Eve did for her, is to show that there's more to Marilyn than just being this icon. And really, no other photographer came came so close to showing Marilyn or Norma Jean. And actually, once you know that it's Norma Jean who controlled this, who conceived of all this, who built her up, and when she saw she was boxed in, looked for Eve to, show a more natural side, even as Marilyn as well at that time was changing her career, going for more serious roles. And how to see this, I call Norma Jean Marilyn a feral child, because, she was in 12 foster homes, sexually abused in some of them, and was in an orphanage, in and out of an orphanage. In fact, she married at 16 a neighbor boy just simply so she wouldn't have to go in the orphanage. It was not a love match, it was a keep me out of the orphanage match. So you see this girl who came from the most impossible background, fighting
Hmm.
for her life and fighting for love. And boy, did she get it. I mean, to this day, I don't know that there's anyone who who is so recognizable as Marilyn Monroe.
So I'm curious as well, because I felt that one of the central tensions in the book is this gap between, who Marilyn Monroe really was, as you just described, right? But who
Mhm,
the
mhm.
public believed her to be. Do you think that she ever succeeded in closing that gap? I mean, or was it just, too much of an impossible task because this idea of Marilyn Monroe, I mean, even to today, is still so ingrained in, I think, in who so many of us think she was.
Yes. I think it didn't help Marilyn's cause, I if that cause is to show the world this person who achieved impossible things. Um, it didn't help her to die young. What it did is it
Mm.
did, concrete her image as as this sex symbol and vulnerable as you had mentioned earlier, and, oh my gosh, she was probably killed by the Kennedys or whoever. There's
Mhm.
all these legends, and so just more untruth has encased her, that her early death just, provoked.
So, reading this novel now, it's hard, I think, not to think about contemporary conversations around things like image and celebrity, and I think women, trying to reclaim the narratives of who they are. Do you did you see those parallels when you were writing the book?
Oh, sure, because it's an ongoing struggle for women,
Hmm.
um, which seems so crazy because, we're
Yeah.
the what, 51%, and, we know how women really control things, but they're always having to come from behind. Oh,
Hmm.
always having to prove themselves. But, Marilyn had a good, attitude. Hers was, and, I think this is true and for today, and we need to embrace this. She said, "It's a woman's world, and men are only living in it." And this is and this is in the 50s, when
Uh-huh.
they were working hard to keep it a man's world, and that's when they really claimed it.
Well, they
Um,
still are.
yes, yes, it's always gonna be a battle, and it's funny, it doesn't have to be a battle. I don't think women are trying um, put men down. They're just trying to be what they need to be. They're just,
Hmm.
you know, trying to feel whatever, you know, just do it, achieve whatever goal they want. That's all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, Lynn, before we wrap up, when readers put this
Mhm.
book down, I mean, what are you hoping they understand differently? Not about Eve, about Marilyn Monroe. I mean, really about about women behind the images that I think that we already know who they are.
Well, that's the thing. Look deeper. And I think it's important to realize that behind every image, uh, the person is likely very different. And it's dangerous. I think even like now you look at stars and you feel like you know them. You can't really know them unless it's you personally know them. So it's just know that people are always more complex
Mm.
than whatever you think their image is.
Well, Lynn, I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. We've been speaking with Lynn Cullen. She's the author of the new book, When We Were Brilliant. You've been listening to the Idaho Matters podcast from Boise State Public Radio. To stay in touch, you can find quick Idaho Daily News every morning when you subscribe to the Connector podcast. Find this and other Boise State Public Radio podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.
So you can't see this, but hopefully you can hear it. Behind every Boise State Public Radio podcast is a team working hard to bring you stories that matter. So if you value podcasts like this one, please support them. Hit donate at boisestatepublicradio.org. Thanks.